Welcome everybody to the OPT Network. As we are celebrating mothers on this Mother's Day weekend, we thought it only appropriate that we speak to somebody that's doing incredible work and has written extensively on mothering. Her name is Noelle Mirring. She and her co-author have written a book entitled Theology of Home II, The Spiritual Art of Homemaking. Noelle, good morning and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. So tell us about the journey to Theology of Home II and the title.
Well,
Let's start with the title.
Yeah, it started with Theology of Home I. So we have two books now. The first one came out a year earlier. And the title came to my co-author, actually, Carrie Gress. She was on her treadmill and listening to a song about a homecoming, and it just really struck her about how significant the concept of home is as a physical place, but also just as an idea. We watch movies about homecomings. We watch, tearful homecomings of soldiers coming back to see their families, and I think we all experience that feeling when we've been traveling or out of town. We get back to our homes, and you just feel a sense of relief. And so the idea was just that to dig into that concept more and to see that really this is sort of a foretaste. Our home is meant to be a foretaste of heaven, our ultimate home. And it has the same sort of sense. It's ordained towards the same things, a sense of belonging, a place where you're valued just for who you are, not for what you can do for someone. It's a place where you feel you're ultimately safe and feel nurtured, cared for, and live in community. And so that it seemed like such a great spoke to such a universal longing. And so we really wanted to speak to that, because in so many ways home has been denigrated or maybe seen as like a filling station, is actually Wendell Berry refers to it, that the modern home is a filling station where we just go and get filled up, but we don't actually spend time there, reside there, abide there. And so we wanted to think about this concept in the contrast with the modern notion of home.
So tell me about you and Carrie coming together to write together and how that happens.
Sure. So it started in 1997. We actually knew each other about 4 years ago now. We met in grad school. We both were getting a master's in philosophy at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. And it was a really small department. There were only three women who were getting their master's at the time. And we just became close friends. We didn't have much going on in the town, so we just would study together and pray together and talk about all sorts of things together. But then we sort of lost touch. She went on to get a PhD. I got married very quickly after grad school and started having children. But we reconnected a few years ago and realized that we were both really passionate about similar sorts of ideas and work. And she had at that time already established herself as an author. So we just started working together, and she asked me to start writing for her. And I started writing more and more. And then she came up with this concept, and we just decided to do it together. So yeah, it was great.
Talk about bringing home back to its place of heaven, the place where you can go when, all else fails. You can always go home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautifully put. In some ways, we've all been without our, even if involuntarily in a way, been forced to re-examine home life, right? Because of the quarantine. But I think there's been something bubbling up in the zeitgeist for the last decade or so, where people have been more interested in the domestic arts. Making bone broth and having kitchen gardens and knitting, even, all of these things have sort of come back into the cultural imagination. And so these are interesting trends. And I think they're reactions, maybe an excess of public life or an excess of convenience and wanting to get back to basics. And so I think what that speaks to is a desire, really, not just for those activities, but actually to what you're saying, a place where you can always be accepted, you can always be received. And there's something really beautiful in that concept. And I think it's connected to womanhood in some ways, that we receive people, that we can really take people into our hearts, into our prayer lives, and onto our kitchen table for a cup of coffee, and dig into, what's going on in their lives and really share with them, but also be a listening and a kind presence and a heart to them. So, these are beautiful capacities that are somehow connected both to womanhood and to the home, that I think in a really beautiful and profound way.
Absolutely. And I like what you both write about when you start to talk about the way that home and being a homemaker is almost denigrated now. Like you can talk to a woman and say, as we all do at a certain point in the conversation, well, what do you do? Well, I'm just a homemaker. But we really have lost touch in this culture of fast pace and being defined by things. We have really lost touch with how important it is to be a homemaker. It is probably the most important job on the planet.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's almost been sort of like a propaganda campaign against
Oh,
it,
yeah.
where, yeah, it seems like for decades there's been this effort to belittle the work that a woman does in the home. And it's really to our detriment and to the detriment of everyone, and not just ourselves, but our children, our husbands, society as a whole, because this is such a crucial job and such a noble one. And I think the first thing that we need to reorient ourselves to is sort of this undoing of these messages, a remembering of why this is important. And so our books really are not just about the how, although that's a bit in there. It's really more deeply about the why. Why is this beautiful? And that's part of the reason why we want to have beautiful photography, and as well as the words, and we want the words to be very substantive, because this is a rich topic. It's not trite. It's not superficial. It's not silly. It's really actually deeply human. And I think that we all long to lead deeply, deeply human lives. And so I think that's what we've been missing and what people are looking for now.
And I think what culture has done, you were talking about how everybody had to reset after COVID. I think we have to reset the idea of home and what that really means. Because when you say to someone, because I can remember when our son was first born, I was a homemaker, and I understood with pride that it didn't matter that I had come out of the professional world, because I was doing something that was relevant. I was making a home. I was there with my son. And I've talked to people on both sides of the coin that say it's just not for me. I just can't do that, and that's fine. But there's still something so critically important about homemaking. And in this busy life that we've all created, and I call it every woman really now wanting to wear the busy badge. Oh, I'm busier than you. Oh, you think you're busy. Well, I'm busier than that. We kind of have gotten away and sort of devolved the importance of homemaking. And so I think that this is a relevant topic right now. I want to take a break here, Noelle, but when we come back, I want to talk about defending the 3 motherhood lies and what that means and how we can get past that. Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Noelle Mirring, and we're talking about her and her co-author's book. It's entitled Theology of Home II, The Spiritual Art of Homemaking. And I love that, because homemaking is very spiritual. You can really know a lot about a person when you walk into their home, can't you, Noelle?
Absolutely. It really becomes an extension of who we are in so many ways. I was just visiting some friends, and they were embarrassed about their home because it was extremely modest. But I couldn't believe how beautiful it was, and it was because there was something in the way that she had arranged, her kitchen, and, had crates for her potatoes, and her mugs hung just so. And I just thought, there's so much love that is reflected all around me. It was striking. And it was a real reminder that, it's not about luxury or materialism. It's really about, the love that we're putting into our daily activities, this seemingly mundane. There's far more going on there than just seemingly mundane tasks.
And just the things. It's far more than just the things. Now, the things have their place if that's what you want, but you can really feel love in a home when you walk into it. And that really, for me, separates the difference between a house and a home.
Absolutely. It's not just 4 walls. There's something immaterial and almost in an intangibleness that you is translated through the matter, that, as you say, is a reflection of the intentionality, the care, the love, some things going on beneath the surface that really come through in a beautiful way.
And I think that this is an important conversation, because we really have gotten away from home and what home had meant for many, many, decades and even centuries. Home was a place, as I said earlier, that you could go when you couldn't go anywhere else. But one of the things that you guys write about is defending the three motherhood lies. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think that the lie that we've been sold is that we are defined by our oppression. That the definition of the woman is that she is somehow suppressed in some way, just by virtue of her womanhood, and that to be a woman, that we need to fight against that. And it really is built around this metric of power, that power is our purpose. Someone else has power. I need to get power. And I think that we are powerful already. That's a fact of our existence. The distinction is that, what is our purpose? Is our purpose power, or is our purpose service, love, care? And I think all of humans, that's our actual purpose, right? We are called to lovingly be in communion with other people, first but first and foremost with our Lord, and fostering those relationships. And women have a great capacity, I think, to foster relationships. And so it's tapping into that capacity that we already have, but reorienting our understanding about why we're here and what our daily efforts should be oriented toward.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that culture is trying to change that? As you said, making women, and in some areas, women are still, we're still fighting for, many women are still fighting for those positions at the table, and even at the table, when women get there, they're still fighting. Do you think that society has used that power to make us feel like being a woman at home is somehow not as important?
Yeah, I think so. I was following this, or a friend actually told me about this, a young woman who she's secular and she's a feminist, very, very smart. And she had some posts recently where she talked about she made her husband dinner and she got criticized for it. And people were saying, oh, that's, why don't you tell him to make dinner? And, all these things. And she had this great comeback where she said, why do we have to consider our womanhood an embarrassment? Why is this a humiliation to be a woman? And that part of, and it's not even just being a woman, it's just being a human being, right? That we do generous things for each other. We self-sacrifice. So while there's a reality of, some sort of, there's certainly going to be instances of injustice and sexism and all these
Sure.
things. Those things are real and they're true. However, I think I heard this brilliant career woman. She was a real estate mogul. Her name escapes me now, but she was asked this question in an interview about how she achieved success in the 1970s in New York City with all these men around her. And she said, I just never thought too much about it. And I thought that was brilliant and so simple. That in some ways, the more we kind of like think about these things and have consternate over them, in some ways, the more power that they have over us. And so it's a simple answer, but I think there's something really wise in there, that we will find ourselves to be victims the more we're seeking to see our victimhood. And I think that women can get tripped up on that. And in the professional world, I think it probably serves us better to not be looking for ways in which our womanhood is hurting us, but rather be looking for ways in which we can strive to do better.
And even in the home, not how womanhood is hurting us. Because I was having this conversation just a few weeks ago with a group of women, and I said, I think we need to rethink the conversation that we're having with our girls. Because see, what has happened is we have evolved so much that now we're saying to our girls, don't go to college and find your husband. You go to college and you get your career. And then after you get your career, then you stockpile everything that you need and everything that society says and that the people in your court say is success. And then you find a husband. But guess what has happened by then? Now your biological clock is ticking so loudly and so quickly that, you're in a quandary now. And then so society is saying, well, okay, here's another thing you can do. You can freeze your eggs until you're really ready. And so what we're doing is we're pushing women, and please understand, I'm not supporting women being educated and being their very best. But I think that we're cultivating a culture that says you really don't have to have a man. And
I
that's
think you're
really the breakdown of the family.
yeah, I
We
think
have to
you're
rethink it.
absolutely right. I think that's so important what you're saying, and I think that about young women all the time because I think if you imagine your life, what's really going to bring us happiness? Who's going to hold your hand on your deathbed? It's not your boss, it's your husband, your children, and so if you think about it in that sort of way, you realize like, well, what ought I be prioritizing here?
Hmm.
I think my co-author and I both are professional women. We travel, we speak, we write books, we're authors. But I think we both have a real clear understanding that, this is an important and a valued part of our lives, but it's not more important than our family and what ultimately is going to make us happy. All this could go away, and I still have my family. And that's what that, and the opposite would not be true. I would be miserable, if in the opposite scenario. So I think we need to encourage young women to think, well, what do you want your life to look like? What's going to bring you true
Exactly.
happiness? And it's going to be love. It's going to be family. Like this is, and so don't be afraid to prioritize that. As you're saying, like that's important. And
But
you're
see,
called.
nobody's talking about that message
Yeah,
because it is not the message that we're sending now. And we're also seeing so many women who are celebrating singleness. And that's fine if that's what you want. But as we're talking about theology and the way that God created, he created man not to be alone. He created man and then he created woman. And so you can't miss that piece because it's not sexy, because it's not, what society says looks good or is right now. And I think that when we go back to the basics and we go back to biblical principles, then we start to say, okay, we really have gotten far away from the path, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah. I think you're right. And I think women, there are some women talking about it, but they're not given a platform in the same way that that sexier message is given, right? And so I think that that's why our message might be so misunderstood. I mean, you and I are sitting here having this wonderful, nuanced conversation about all of these different elements. It's not a caricature of home life. It is, but it's a rich, discussion about what this means. But I think for most people in society, what our message would be reduced to a caricature. It would
mhm.
be reduced to sort of the fundamentalist home with a suppressed woman and all these things. And I think that our human experience indicates that that's really not true. I don't see my friends in that light. I don't see myself in that light, and
Right.
certainly not you in that light. But that message is as complex and interesting and rich as it is. It's not given a platform. And that's to society's detriment, I think, because I think a lot of women are very hungry for it.
Absolutely. Let's get a break here. But when we come back, we'll have more of Theology of Home II, the spiritual art of homemaking. Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Noelle Mirring, and we're talking about Theology of Home II, the spiritual art of homemaking. And I think sometimes we forget that making a home is very spiritual, and moms are the catalyst in most cases for building that love and the spirit when you walk into a home. And one of the things that you write about in the book is mom's identity and that identity coming from God. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, identity obviously is such a concern for everyone now, and rightly so, because I think we're trying to understand who we are. We're trying to relearn all these really basic things, but there's a real harm that comes when we seek our identity from a source that is not the definition of who we are, through the affirmation of others, through comparison with others, through from the esteem or honors, of the world. And I think we know as children of God that our definition is grounded utterly in our being His daughter, being daughters of a loving Father. And so, once we find that grounding, we become rooted in a way that keeps us, it's centering us and stabilizing us and helping us to kind of keep from falling into these pits of comparison and anxiety that I think come from trying to receive our value from other people, and even in our families. We are mothers, and it's an impossible task not to find some identity affirmation from being a good mother and being a good wife and these things, and that's good. but they have to be subordinate to our relationship with God and our understanding of who we are through his eyes, first and foremost.
And you've included a lot of women's stories in the book, and those stories are rich with, how women come to their role as mothers. Tell us a little bit about those stories.
Yeah, so this was a really important piece of the second Theology of Home book. We didn't do in the first one. The first one's a bit more about the home, but this one we really want to be about the woman taking care of the home. And so we have profiled, as you said, throughout the book, somewhere around 10 different women, and we really pulled from all different ages and stages of life. So we have a grandmother who I think is actually a great grandmother. At this point, but we have a single woman, professional woman. We have a professional mother of 9 who is an architect, and how she balanced it all. We also have a working mother who is not working by choice, but working by necessity. And just what that journey was like, about, resisting that this was what she was being called to in life, but then eventually realizing that this was what her family needed, and the demands are all part of it. That her days are so filled with demands. And then we have a stay-at-home mother who's mother of many, and a first-time mother. Anyway, so it just became about that we want to illustrate through all these different women that the common thread is not a very strict circumstance or role, or it's not going to look the same. Our circumstances are going to be different. What we're called to is different. The common thread, rather, is responding to what God's asking of us, both in the small things that are demands that are thrown at us every day, but also the bigger circumstances of our lives, the things that are hard, the things that are challenging, the things that we might resist. That we can through prayer really start to discern what we're being called to and what that's supposed to look like. And so the common thread really is a type of obedience and relationship, and ability to listen to what God is asking for us in our lives.
I think it's interesting that you talk about comparison. There's this quote that I absolutely love, that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that what society has done is it has pitted women against each other systematically, and it always has. And when we are pitted against each other because we're comparing ourselves to another, whether we come out higher or lower, there's still a loss of joy. And so if we can put down, those comparisons and just understand that I'm okay, you're okay. I don't have to pull out a yardstick to compare myself with you. See, there was a time where women came together, because Scripture tells us that, when 2 or more come together, touching and agreeing, there were times where women came together and prayed, and things happened. And so we've got to get back to that, instead of being concerned about, who is more influential, or who is, got the better job or the better salary or the bigger home. And I think that, we really have to start looking at where we have come to, what we've come to, and go back again to those basic, spiritual principles that never change and will always work.
Absolutely. I think that's so true what you're saying. And we've had a shift where I think we've inverted what the important part of our life is. So we think of the most public parts of our lives now as being where we really are valued and where we're really important and where we can really make a difference. And for the Christian, I think we really need to remember that it's actually the opposite. It's the hidden part of life that roots you. It's a hidden part of life where you find your peace. And that's in your prayer life. And it's also in your home, that if your public life is going well, but your home life is a disaster, you're not going to be at peace. And so we need to make sure that we're ordering these priorities in a particular way. Because if we're finding all of our importance on this sort of surface part of our lives, well, of course, we're going to be wrapped up in comparison. Definitely going to be wrapped up in anxiety and competition, all these things. We won't be able to support each other, as you're saying, in that very beautiful type of community that women are so capable of. But that community and that capacity to support one another starts with us having an interior life of in our souls, where we are understanding where we can grow in generosity. I'm seeing, examining where I might have been selfish today, or where I might have let my ego get out of whack or something, and working on these things. And the more you start seeing what you need to work on, the less you're going to start pointing your finger at what somebody else needs to work on, because you need mercy, and so you want to more willing to extend mercy to someone else. But all these things stem from a very vivacious, I think, interior life of your soul. Not your public life. Your public life is an outgrowth of that, rather.
And talk about the idea of balance. There's always been this adage: can women have it all? And when you have all of the things that the world says that you should have, or society says that you should have, how do you balance it all? What did you learn about, and what have you learned just as a woman that is career oriented, as a husband and family, about this thing called balance?
Yeah, balance is a tricky one. We have a whole chapter about it in our first book, actually. And, women, I think, are real multitaskers. We might be nursing a baby and also paying our taxes or something, but whereas men, I think their minds tend to be more linear. But I think that because of that capacity to multitask, we tend to take on a lot. And our instincts, we're very sensitive and aware to what our children's needs are, just naturally, I think. And so, we wind up becoming pulled in all sorts of different directions, which can lead to sort of a bit of chaos. So as far as having it all and how to balance it, I don't think that there's quite a magic pill, but I think having a really strong communicative relationship with our husbands is extremely helpful. And because we can help each other find that balance. I sometimes I don't see the forest for the trees. And if I sit down and talk to my husband and talk about what, I'm trying to figure out how I handle this and this and this, he's really good at being a sounding board and then also saying, it sounds like what you really want to do is this, and maybe you need to pull back here. And I do that for him as well. But I think that understanding also stems from both of us prioritizing what we ought to prioritize. So he had a real shift early in our marriage when we had little kids, where he realized, I need to start my day. The most important part of my day, the crux of my day, is when I come home and I cross that threshold. It's not my job. And rather than just unwind with a beer and football or something, that I want to get down on the ground with the kids, and I want to give my wife help her make dinner, or whatever the demands are here. But I think what we both have a better time balancing things when we both understand that we have a common project, and that's our home and family life. And that is important. And it helps it from being trivialized in my mind, the fact that he sees it as such a noble effort. And then from that, we can help each other balance the rest, understanding that we have that foundation.
Absolutely. Let's take a break here. But when we come back, we're going to tell you how to get the book, and we're going to talk about celebrating mothers on this Mother's Day weekend. Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. What a rich conversation, the spiritual art of homemaking. And it's so inclusive, not just about the home, but about the woman who fills a home. And it's not just about women who are married, and you have a diverse group of women that you spoke to on this journey to writing the book about mothering and about home. And I want to talk about celebrating motherhood, because at the end of the day, I think every mother wants to know that she's doing a good job, wants to be validated. What do you say about that? And what did you learn about that?
I think there's a sort of irony there, which is the more that I find that I'm seeking validation, the less likely people are happily and freely giving it to me. So one of the lessons I learned, and I didn't write this in the book, but I think it's relevant. A good friend of mine who's a great woman, she and her husband always felt that they were, trying so hard. She would try so hard to make Father's Day special, and he would try so hard to make Mother's Day special. And at one point they had this great conversation where they just said, let's think of this differently. Why don't on Father's Day, I just try to be the best father I can be and just like have a really fun day. And on Mother's Day, why don't you do the same? And it gave her a lot of peace and freedom. And I started implementing that just in my own mind on Mother's Day. My kids and husband are sweet, and they always try to make me happy. There's a breakfast in bed, and it's, sometimes food that my children made that isn't the most appetizing all the time, but what they're doing, their effort is so sweet and so kind and dear, and just to receive that. And, I keep my expectations low and just think, I want to love you. The more that we are focused on what we're doing for the other, the more we're actually going to, paradoxically be affirmed in their response to us. And so I don't mean this in a martyrdom way where I'm just all about sacrifice and I don't need to
Sure.
be given anything back. It's just that it gives me more peace, and it leads to, I think, a better result anyway if I approach it differently without as much concern about, how am I going to be feted on Mother's Day.
Talk about the photography and the beauty of the pictures that you all shared in the book.
Yeah, that was a really important piece, is that we really, Carrie and I both are writers, but we really want to have this be not just a book about ideas, but a book about visuals and what does this embodiment of womanhood look like? So we connected with this woman who's a great woman, a good friend of mine now, Kim Bale, and she is out here with me in Southern California, and she just as an amazing photographer. It was COVID, and so we had a second photographer because it was trickier for her to travel, who's also very talented, named Dory Greco Rutherford. And the two of them, I think, just really did an excellent job of capturing home life in a new way where it's full of life. I think I love design magazines, and I think most women do too, but they can seem a little sterile. And we really wanted this to be really full of life. So we have pregnant women and babies in there, and men holding a baby, and a man holding an axe in the first row, chopping wood, and, all sorts of things, but just to show kind of what this life can look like, and the real beauty of our domestic project. So yeah, that was a key part, is just having it be a very visually engrossing and stunning, engaging book.
And so this is the second book, Theology of Home I, and this is II. And so when you come to the end of this book and this work, what was your big takeaway?
That's a great question. I think my biggest takeaway is how much there is that is profound in the really simple parts of life, and how hungry people are for it. We have heard from women all over the map, from all different stages and belief systems, who have really responded to this book. And oftentimes young mothers say, it's the first time I saw myself reflected in something that was, beautiful. And I don't see that in the movies so much, or in women's magazines. I think women's magazines are constantly telling women to either be a sex symbol or to be androgynous. And what we've lost in between those two extremes is just this sort of understanding of femininity, that it doesn't have to be a cartoon, but it can look differently with different women, but that it's not reduced to our sexuality, that's not what makes us beautiful. And in this youth obsessed culture, I think we get so hung up on that. And so, secondarily, I think what the other most profound thing I've learned through writing this is how beautiful women are into old age. And I think that that's so important, because it's really in the body of the woman, we see that unity of the spiritual and the material, and we see, the joy in her eyes, even through in the laugh wrinkles from living a happy life full of love and laughter. And we see it in the body that has borne the marks of her life and love with her family. These are beautiful things, but they're things that speak to the intangible quality of the spiritual life, coming through in her appearance. But I think it's important for women to remember that our beauty is not defined by a makeup industry or magazine industry or any cliche or music video, but rather it's something far more profound than that. And we can feel graceful growing old. We can feel beautiful, and we can feel, valued and significant still.
Wow, that is so beautiful. And I think that it's a takeaway from every one of us, because the culture that we're living in is screaming at us to stay younger, longer, and to do everything that we can. But here's the real truth. None of us can outrun Father Time. We just can't. And so, if we live well and we show up in life as our best selves, then it's our best chance to be our best, if that makes sense. And it's something that is a work in progress, I think, for each and every one of us. It is a beautiful book, beautifully written, beautifully photographed. The photography is beautiful, and it is a book that every woman, I think, should pick up and read. Before we've got to let you go, tell us how to get the book and how to connect with your community.
Sure. Well, we have a website. It's called theologyofhome.com. We have a daily email subscription, free. We also have a shop and a blog where Carrie and I write smaller articles along with another very talented woman named Emily, who was brought on she does beautiful floral tutorials, all sorts of things. You can buy the book through our shop at theologyofhome.com or through our publisher, tanbooks.com or .org, Tan Books. If you just Google Tan Books, you'll find them.
And so what's next for you guys?
We're just starting another sort of a mini version of Theology of Home. It's going to be a little bit different and different take, but thematically, it's going to be a bit more specific. But we're really excited about that as well. So yeah, we've got that. We've got a lot of writing projects coming up. I have a new book coming out this month, solo book. So yeah, we're keeping busy.
There you go. Well, you know what? Thank you for making us kind of look back at the basics and look back at those things that are so important about home and mothering. It is an incredible read. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back with more right after this.